So before we actually started recording, we were chatting about how I actually had a post Hindu, which is not conventional, but because I got married in a surprise way, my friends,
Surprise!
yeah,
Why would you tell any of your friends?
yeah,
I'm
they were like,
joking.
well, we still want a Hindu and a reason to go and have fun for a weekend, right? Okay, so we went to Brighton, and of course, right like the day that we were arriving, they announced that the first person in Brighton with the coronavirus was like they found them or whatever. They were
So the first person in the UK, wasn't it?
Yeah, was where we were going. So subsequently, about like four of us have gotten quite ill after the Hindu, like full on flu, like symptoms, everything. So we were kind of just chatting about how, yeah, coronavirus panic.
Nothing says I want to party like getting diagnosed with some sort of strange flu symptoms.
Exactly.
I like how we're not blaming this on the fact that we drank. And
Yeah, I didn't sleep a whole lot.
for like 2 solid days and like barely slept.
Yeah,
That's
but
not
it's
what made us ill.
No,
No.
no, absolutely not. That's outrageous.
Unacceptable.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Murder Friends, the podcast where three friends from three different countries talk about murder. My name's Alana, and I'm Canadian.
I'm Anna, and I'm American.
My name's Hannah and I'm British.
So sit back and relax, you're among friends, and let's talk murder.
So I had the worst commute of my life. And I've been on a lot of trains. I've commuted into London for years now. I'm trying to figure out how long it's been. Maybe like 8 or 9 years. Nearly.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, like a long time now. And I've seen some like horrible things on trains. I was once on the train, I just saw like someone had left us a stack of porn.
Magazines?
No, like DVDs.
Oh, my.
Like a little stack. And I was like, wow, what you want to see in the morning? I've seen people throwing up, I've seen pissing, I've seen fights, I've seen anything you can imagine happening on a train. I've probably seen it. But the other day I had the worst commute of my life. And that's because my train is normally like 8 or 10 coaches, I'm not sure. And it was half the size it was supposed to be when it pulled into where I get the train home from. So it's like double the amount of people in like this space. So everyone's like crammed in. And even though it's winter and it's like cool outside, it's not cold, I wouldn't say it's cold, it gets really, really hot really, really quickly. So you're standing there in like your coat with like your work stuff on, and you're just sweating and it's just disgusting, and everyone's like pushing each other and nudging and doing that really passive aggressive British tutting, which I am a huge fan of and also a perpetrator of. And we were just pulling into like one of the big like interchange stations where like a lot of people get off, and we kind of stopped outside the station for a little bit, and someone farted. And first of all, I thought it was a joke. Like, it was like a joke fart noise. I thought it was like a sound effect. I like how you're fucking laughing.
I'm so sorry. This is I feel like I'm right there with you.
I'm trying to paint you a really horrifying picture of what actually happened. And it sounded like a fart machine, like some weird sound effect. And like initially, a lot of people just like laughed because they thought it was someone's phone going off or something. And then the smell.
No.
The smell. It smelled like something had died inside of a human being. And I was like already distraught about having to stand up for 25 minutes, which I don't enjoy standing up. We all know this. Standing up in very close proximity to people, don't enjoy touching people, sweating, and then having that horrific stench, like, envelope an entire carriage. I was so upset that I cried. I actually like burst into tears because I couldn't deal with it. And the woman next to me was like, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you sick?" And I was like, yeah, why not? Because I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like tears streaming down my face, like almost sobbing because I was so upset by the whole situation. And then we pulled into the station. And I had to get off the train because I couldn't be on that carriage of the train. And I then have an extra, like, I live in Kent. We all live in Kent. And, like, the train journey home is long. and then I had to get back on that train. So you can still smell like the ghost of this horrific fart.
God, that's bad.
Whilst being like my eyes watering thinking about it. Whilst then I'd convinced myself that I could smell the fart on me.
Oh my god.
And I got home and I've never taken my clothes off so quickly and got in the shower in my entire life because I felt like it was everywhere. And you might as well have just shat on me. Like I know we spoke about like the Toronto serial shitter.
I know.
I felt like that. I was so upset.
Do you know who actually did it? The perpetrator?
Not a clue. Not a fucking clue. And because if I did, I would stab them like 100%.
Did like anyone make a comment out loud?
People were like shouting. I was crying. I expected some sort of like wailing to start happening. One man was full on like pissing himself laughing, and I was like, if you think this is funny, it's not funny. I've had a really bad day at work. And
oh my god, that's awful.
It was truly horrific. Like looking back on it now, it's kind of funny, but at the time, I thought my world was going to end.
I can't even imagine. Like, the idea of being sardined on the train itself gives me anxiety. And I feel like you're hot and sweaty and there's so many people and you just finished work and you're stressed out and you're tired. That probably would have been enough to, like, give me a panic attack or at least have a little bit of a cry because that's a lot to take on.
I have legitimately already, like, I've had panic attacks on the train in situations like that. So
yeah, I can 100%. I can see, yeah, not for me. No, thank you. But then to be in that horrific environment and then to have someone literally like shit themselves,
it was I wouldn't even be able to like replicate the noise. It was so bad. And normally, like, fart jokes, I find them quite funny because I'm a child. But, like, this was next
Not
level.
when it happens to you in that sort of circumstance.
That was, like, chemical warfare. That was, as far as I'm concerned, some sort of war crime. Like, it was not okay.
So for today, for true crime news, I have some news, and it kind of links to the Serial podcast. And I'm sure, well, I know that you two are big fans, and it was my gateway podcast. It's like what got me into podcasts. And I remember my daughter was just born, and I would be sitting, rocking her, feeding her a bottle, listening to Serial in my headphones. Like she's like tiny newborn. So yeah, start as you mean to go on. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard of it, if not listened to it, because it's, that first series is a big deal. Anyway, there was some news this week, not related to Adnan, but about new DNA evidence has linked a man named in the popular Serial podcast to the murder of another woman in 1996. So Ronald Lee Moore is now believed to have been responsible for the death of 23-year-old Sean Marie Neal, a sex worker who was strangled to death inside a South Carolina condo in 1996. Speaking at a press conference on this past Wednesday, police said that advancements in technology helped us to find samples of Moore's DNA on a mattress and towels taken from the crime scene. Moore has actually committed suicide in 2008 while he was jailed on an unrelated burglary charge, and he was named as a potential suspect in a separate killing 3 years later. That case, which is the 1999 murder of Baltimore High School student Hae-Min Lee, which is obviously, again, if you've listened to the podcast, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It became the podcast that became a worldwide phenomenon when it was released in 2014. So Min Lee was strangled to death as well, just as Neal had been, and Moore was based in Baltimore at the time of Hae-Min Lee's death. So as we know, Adnan Syed was eventually convicted of her murder, but obviously he's always protested his innocence, and I think there's people who believe he's innocent or guilty, but if you listen to the podcast, there's been spin-off stuff, there's been so much about this case. It's a huge case, and I read the Rabia's book.
Oh, Rabia Chowdhury's book.
Yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah, it was really good. Alana actually gave it to me for Christmas or my birthday last year or something. Anyway, it's really good. Yeah. So back in 2013, 5 years after suicide, Moore was also named as the likely perpetrator of another 1999 killing involving a Baltimore woman. Annalise Lee, 27, was found strangled in her apartment. So the fact that Moore has now been credibly suspected of strangling 2 other women to death could increase speculation that he was responsible for the killing. So he had come up in the podcast for that, but now he's actually been DNA linked to another one with the same, obviously the same sort of crime. So meanwhile, in announcing that Moore had been linked to the murder of Sean Marie Neal on Wednesday, police said that they reached out to her family to inform her of the news. According to her family, Neal had been in South Carolina working for an escort service. Neal is said to have met up with a man by the name of Don Gibbons in North Myrtle Beach, and her boyfriend later called police to report she hadn't returned home after the meetup. Police later learned that Don Gibbons was a fake name and obtained DNA samples from an unknown person off Neal's clothing. But at the time, there was no match, but since he went into the system, they were able to actually test it and link him. In 2017, more than 21 years later, police reopened the case, and as a part of the investigation, they took new samples from towels and a mattress retrieved from the scene, and were able to run them through DNA database, and Moore came up as a match. The detectives then tested DNA samples from Neal's clothing against Moore's, and also similarly discovered a match. So they're actually, law enforcement is now kind of opening a wider case, like a wider look into him, and see if he's actually responsible for more crimes. They think he might very well be. So while it's not a direct link to that case, it is, the fact that he's actually the same, like, MO type thing. And
yeah, and if he was in the area at the same time. And
exactly.
Oh.
Jeez. I remember listening to Serial. That was my gateway as well, actually, because I think it came out like 2014-ish, but I wasn't really into podcasts at that point. And I remember when I first moved to England, like late 2015, I started listening because I was like, I gotta take the bus all the time. I'm so bored. I gotta listen to something. And the first one was that first season of Serial. And if you haven't listened to it, oh my goodness, like, go listen to it. And especially now that even more evidence and things are coming out, and the spin-offs, and people are writing books about it. Like, there's so much you could dive into. But the story itself is bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a good one. And yeah, it's definitely been one of my favorites. Probably will always be one of my favorites. But then sometimes I kind of want to go back and listen to it because it was my first one that I listened to. And it was really
my first one.
My first time.
Anna, have you ever had a hickey?
Oh, God. Hey. What happens on the Hindu stays in the Hindu.
You wonder if it's as good as you remember it.
That's what I'm trying to say. Because now we've had the likes of like Bear Brook and just other really well produced. Now people put a lot of money into podcasts. Like then I think that was one of the first. That was like probably one of the first huge podcasts, wasn't it? I would say. Well,
I think it was definitely
in that genre.
Yeah, it was definitely like a game changer for like true crime podcasts. I also think like if you went back and listened to it now, knowing other stuff, like knowing more information, because like a lot more information has come out, and like, is it Asia?
Yeah, Asia McLean,
and like she's come out and said things, and she's quite like vocal on Twitter, and I wonder how well it has aged.
Yeah, I do wonder too. Now, because now there's just more information. It'd be really cool or good if they just did like an update episode kind of thing. Maybe even like, 5 years on, this is what's happened since.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if Sarah Koenig did because she's amazing.
Maybe we could cover it in a True Crime 101 if anyone's interested.
We should. If you guys are interested out there, let us know if you want us to cover the case.
So in our last episode, we discussed Laurie Vale, and there's been a bit of an update to that. And by update, I mean that I've just been reading a lot of stuff about it on the internet.
Same. I can't stop.
So intrigued. I think it's one of the ones that's just it gets more and more bananas every time you like search her name.
Yeah.
So I found
crazy.
I found some like I put them in bullet points because there are a few. So I found out she has a podcast.
I don't even know what to say about this.
Yeah, I found out that she threw a pool party hours after her estranged husband was shot dead by her brother.
Oh.
Because that's normal behaviour, right?
Oh, God.
Wow.
I found that when she was found in Hawaii, the property was searched and everything, and she had her missing daughter's mobile phone with her.
That's not a good
And
sign.
I don't think any 17-year-old would like willingly relinquish their mobile phone.
No, God.
Yeah. The children's grandparents have offered a £20,000 reward for these kids. And now there are also reports, which I find this even more kind of shocking, that police have said, this is from Como News, police have said Vale and Chad Daybell have lied about their children's whereabouts and even their existence, with Chad Daybell allegedly telling one person that Laurie Vale has no kids, and Laurie Vale allegedly telling another person that her daughter died more than a year ago. So now they're even saying, like, these children don't exist or they're dead.
That's
like,
not
one
good.
of them's already dead. And that's like, oh, what? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
It's definitely not good because at this point, if somebody had them, like as in they left them with somebody, they would have obviously come forward. It's all over the media everywhere, like internationally, it's all over the media, and the fact that or them themselves, they would make contact with. You think? I think unfortunately, I think this is not going to end. This is not ending well.
No.
Can you imagine being a parent and suddenly you do not have your two children and you are saying you don't know where they are, but you just like carry on with your life, like you're having fun in Hawaii, like who cares where my kids are, they're fine, or and then telling people, oh, my kid died years ago. It's like,
What?
who in their right mind would buy any of that?
I mean, imagine if I just like came to meet you guys for coffee, or you invited you over one day and was like, you're like, where's Poppy? And I'm like, I don't know, you know.
Oh, she's
Yeah,
with a
she's
friend.
been gone for a few
with a friend.
months.
You know, but every time you came, it'd just be like, you'd be like, what? Like even just
I would
people
call the
around
police
you.
so quickly on you.
Like straight away.
Oh
Like
yeah.
100%. I'd be like, yeah, there's some fucking weird shit going on.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. It really is bizarre. But
Anyway,
I
stay
think
tuned.
I think every week now we're gonna have, I think Alana called it Laurie Corner.
Yes,
Yeah.
to Laurie
Laurie
Corner.
So we'll do an
This
update every
batshit
now and
crazy
then.
woman.
She still hasn't produced her children, even though she was ordered to do so.
I wonder what the next step is. Like,
Well,
yeah, what is
if
the
you're
next
if you're
thing?
ordered to like produce your children and you don't do it, surely you should be arrested.
Well, that would be like child neglect or something, right? Surely, because I mean, her one daughter is like 17 years old, but the other one's quite young.
It's
Yeah,
7,
and-
yeah.
I believe he's autistic as well, so he would need more care than normal.
Oh my
probably.
God.
I know.
So we'll have more updates on Laurie Corner next episode.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
So this week for one of our reviews, I wanted to talk about The Man in the Window, one of the new podcasts. Have either of you guys listened to any of it?
Yes, I did the whole thing.
Oh, nice.
I'm almost done with it.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Most of it, but I kind of know this. You're not going to spoil anything, because I kind of get. I know what's happening.
Spoilers.
I know.
So Man in the Window is the new podcast from Wondery in partnership with the LA Times. So right from the bat, you know the quality it's going to be. I don't think I've listened to a podcast yet from Wondery that I didn't like.
Especially LA Times.
Yeah, I mean, and both of them together. So how could you
Yeah.
lose? The synopsis of the podcast description is: Paige St. John, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, has uncovered never-before-revealed details about the man who would eventually become one of California's most deadly serial killers. So this new series traces his path of devastation through his victims' eyes. So there are so many details in this podcast. So even if you do listen to this recap, we are literally only going to be scratching the surface. So please go back and listen if you're interested. If we go through all the details, we will literally be here for days. Like, there is so much research in this podcast. It's unbelievable. So I was thinking, like, how do you even begin to recap this particular story? So I've tried to do just a little short kind of synopsis. We're not going to go too deep. And then I'm really interested on how you guys are finding the podcast. So where do we begin? For those who are not familiar with this case, this serial rapist and murderer in California goes by many names, which is actually one of the issues in catching him. He is suspected to have begun as the burglar known as the Visalia Ransacker. Can't really say that one. In Sacramento area, he was known as the East Area Rapist. He was later known for his Southern California crimes as the original Night Stalker. For most of the 70s, when these sort of crimes were happening, they didn't know or didn't put together that this was potentially one person. It looked like it was multiple people. That's why he has like multiple different names. It wasn't until 2013 that crime writer Michelle McNamara coined the name Golden State Killer, which is like the overarching name. It sort of ties in all these different crimes from different periods in time to sort of stick it onto one name, like one person. So whatever you want to call him, he has committed at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries all around California from 1974 to 1986. He then goes silent, and pretty much anyone into true crime believes that this would never be solved. This is like the Zodiac Killer situation. It was going to be one of those ones that we would just never know. Now, after listening to the podcast, I thought the host, St. John, does a really good job of aligning the story chronologically, which is incredibly difficult when you think of the scopes, the scope of his crimes. But I found she really focuses on the victims, the impact these crimes had on them. She even interviews some of them in a way that I personally thought was sort of non-exploitative. I can't pronounce that one either. It just, the interviews were quite difficult to listen to because the victim is literally describing what happened to them in such a candid way that I really hadn't heard before. And especially with some of these old crimes, like so many of the victims aren't with us anymore or have changed their names, like do not want to be associated with that. So to find people that were actually willing to talk about what happened to them, I thought was surprising and fascinating and really upsetting. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of really upsetting themes in the podcast. So if that's something that you think would upset you, maybe skip this one. For me particularly, the Golden State Killer is the most terrifying story. Like when you get into true crime and people ask you like what is the crime that sticks with you, it was always going to be this one for me. When you hear about how he tormented his victims and how he just like destroyed lives, basically. And they also, which one of the parts I hated the most, they talk about how he called some of them afterwards, sometimes repeatedly calls them. And in the podcast, you do actually hear these calls to his victims. He's basically like taunting them, and it's really hard. Like I found it actually really difficult to listen to, and it actually made me really angry because you think of like how terrified these people would have been, and then to survive such a horrific attack, and then for him to call you and like taunt you with it.
And breathe down the phone. That was the worst part, where he was just like, I'm gonna kill you. And it's like, oh.
And it actually made me so angry. Like I wish I could have just yelled back at him, sort of thing. Like it made a very old crime feel very real in my view.
Yeah.
I think you're right with like the older crimes, especially the ones that happened in like the 70s and 80s, that you think you kind of get that disconnect. You think like, I wasn't born then and I have no idea, like I can't really relate to it. But you're right that they really did like bring it back into focus.
Oh yeah, and like the way that these crimes impacted people and like the traumas and everything.
Yeah, for generations, yeah.
Oh yeah. And while I understand that there is a need to have a singular name like the Golden State Killer, it makes it, everything sort of ties in together. It really puts one name to one person. I think we might have talked about this before, but I kind of wish that they could do maybe less flattering names.
Yeah.
So in the podcast, we do hear that the Golden State Killer has a very small penis. And I kind of wish that could have been, I don't know, incorporated into his name, the tiny penis of California. Just something.
I agree.
Golden State tiny penis.
Can we vote for a name change?
Yeah.
The true crime community?
So after the host, St. Page, goes through all of the crimes, all of the investigations, and it is a bit overwhelming, the amount of crimes. I didn't fully understand just how many people he attacked until you start going, one by one. And they even had to number them at one point. So like, oh, well, he was number 7 and she was number 24. And it's just unbelievable the amount and the size of these crimes. But finally we get through all of that, and we get to Joseph DeAngelo, and we hear his story. So his younger years, his friendships, his job, his personality, maybe most importantly his relationship to a woman named Bonnie, who was actually engaged to DeAngelo in the early 1970s but broke it off. And there is talk about how when that engagement ended, DeAngelo kind of went overboard. Some people actually blame Bonnie, which is so fucking messed up, but they do sort of talk about how that relationship was pivotal in his sort of personality and what have you. Eventually, we then get to the more recent investigations into these crimes, most notably that of Paul Holes, who most people know in true crime circles. Paul Holes has his own podcast now. I did just want to say, on behalf of everyone in the true crime community, I would like to apologize for the hashtag hot for holes. that whole movement that happened. I'm so sorry. It just makes me cringe a little bit. He is a good looking guy, sure, but I'm so sorry. Hot for holes should not have happened.
Yeah.
So gross.
But it did, though.
So disgusting.
What does that say?
We do hear how painstakingly they search, most notably like genealogies for a connection, because Paul Holes and the group that was looking after this case, and actually a lot of just like armchair detectives who are looking into this, really decided, okay, if this is going to happen, it's going to be through genealogies. So with the amount of DNA that was left at these crimes, I mean, there was a lot of it. However, over the years, so much of it was destroyed or lost, which was shocking when you think of like how awful these crimes were. And they were just getting rid of this evidence because it was just taking up too much space. It was a cold case. It was so old. And so that we actually meet some of the like detectives who hold on to pieces of evidence because they don't want to get them destroyed. So it's almost like they have these boxes in their basement or whatever, just in case. And it's that DNA that they're actually able to test in these genealogies. And that is how we finally find DeAngelo, was through these like familia testing. Now, DeAngelo cannot be charged with the rapes or the burglaries because the statute of limitations has expired for these offenses, but he has been charged with 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping, so he faces either life without parole or death if convicted. At this point, DeAngelo was he was arraigned, though, in Sacramento in 2018. Then in 2019, at a court proceeding, prosecutors announced that they would seek the death penalty, and the judge even ruled that cameras may be allowed in the courtroom during the trial. As of right now, he's 74. He's looking frail. Who knows if a trial will happen or when it will happen or if he'll be alive for it. But at this point, we're all just kind of waiting, I guess. We're just sort of going to see what happens. And that is just like a really, really brief overview of that podcast. There's so many crimes to dive into. There's so many different aspects, but I just kind of wanted to do just a very light look at it. But
as light as you can.
Just,
as light as you can.
As light as you can.
Truly one of the most terrifying people in the world.
Yeah, this is the one that always kept me up at night, like the idea of it. And then going into some of the details that I didn't know about, it's just like, holy shit. Like, holy shit. So how did you guys find the podcast?
Brilliant. I agree with you. It was terrifying. I mean, it's always terrified me as well, because I've always thought of it as like, he could still potentially be alive. Like everything I read about it prior to his capture, I was thinking he could still exist. He could still be out and be around and potentially still doing things. And that's what always scared me the most. I mean, I know there's like an entire ocean between us, but like it was still scary. And I loved the podcast. I thought it was brilliant. I had to stop listening to it when I went running because it scared me that much. Because I run in the dark, which is really clever. But one thing that really stuck with me and one thing that made me so unbelievably angry was the complete disregard for women that either he had or that the police had, you know, for these rapes, that they just weren't taken seriously whatsoever. And it was so infuriating, wasn't it?
There was one part where they're talking about how at that time, rape was not considered a violent crime. It's like, well, then what is it? Like, I'm sorry?
Yeah, and it was not only that, it was the relationship that the policing had with like politics and money and people not wanting to, or crimes not being reported because it would like affect the real estate. And it was like unbelievable. It made me so angry. And I'm not saying that these problems don't happen today, because they do happen today, but it was the scale on which that they weren't being dealt with properly. It made me furious, like absolutely furious. Mainly for these women who went through this unimaginable trauma at the hands of an utter shitbag. And they don't get to have their moment in court if they want it.
Yeah.
Because of the statute of limitations. And that is disgusting.
I think as well, like the fear factor of it, because a lot of his crimes, when he was getting into the rapes and things, he would come into the house in the middle of the night when you're in bed and you're asleep. And you think of like, that is my safe place.
Yeah.
I am in my house. I am in my bed. I am under my duvet. And he would just come in and like shine a flashlight in their face. And I just, like, even just thinking about it now, I just get like chills, because that is such a like violation of what you consider to be safe.
Especially if you've then also got like your husband or your partner lying next to you. I know initially he used to prey on single women, but then he started preying on couples. So you think, you know, like there's a man in the house, I feel safe. And it's just like, for these women, no. Like where else and whenever are you ever going to feel safe again?
No, you don't. It was the way that, again, it was so terrifying, but the way that it was all laid out in the podcast, where you can actually, unfortunately, wrap your head around the scale of all of it. It's a really big thing to take on. It's one of those crimes that there's so much crime. There's so many crimes that happened, and that putting them all together and laying them all out so that you're sort of comprehending it all. And then obviously the outrage, and it's scary. It was literally one of those, you're hearing about it. And it was, I think also, didn't Case File do a series on this at some point or something as well? It's those crimes, hearing about them, it just, like, you're listening to it gives you chills up your back.
I think they did it like before he was captured, was that right?
Before he was captured, yeah.
That was terrifying, yeah.
That was terrifying. It's just that they're that scary that, again, you bring up the places that you're supposed to feel safest. It's someone coming into that and taking that away from you. Can you imagine
violating it? Yeah,
violating? You'll never feel safe ever again. And can you imagine just those women, like, you know, or even the men, like, just never being able to feel safe ever again? And that's just horrible. But it was so well produced. I've got a little bit left to finish, but it was fantastic. And anyone who's interested in this case and who wants to sort of dive into it, I would 100% recommend it.
They talk about the male victims as well, don't they?
Yeah.
In one of the later episodes, which I found really interesting.
I found that this podcast is probably the best one in terms of this particular crime, because there are ones, you know, like Case File, and I'm sure like My Favorite Murder and all those types of ones have talked about the Golden State Killer, but I find like this is like the go-to one. Like if you want to know the whole story, I feel like it is very well rounded. I also found it really fascinating, like the way they've laid it out. So it starts off, we go through all of the crimes, we talk to the people. It's very like chronological. This is what's happening, and then the perpetrator moves here, and this is what happens. But then you also get all that background on D'Angelo, which I didn't know about. And they talk to like some of his like friends kind of growing up and talking about his personality and his relationship with Bonnie, and like that stuff I had no idea about until like this podcast. But I find like they really cover it in a way that makes a lot of sense for a crime spree that is like completely overwhelming in scope.
I think if we were to try and like tackle it, I wouldn't even know where to start.
No.
Which is why we will never do it.
No.
No,
This is
go
the
and-
only
yeah.
time.
Just go and listen to
No.
this one, like this podcast.
No,
It was
yeah, basically-
fantastic.
I agree. Yeah, you couldn't even try to. No, yeah, go and listen to this podcast. It takes that long of a podcast to really unpack it all.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. So, what would you guys rate it out of 5?
5.
yeah. I think I'll say 5 too.
Yeah, I think I'll go
I mean, it's
5.
not like a leisure listen. Let me
No.
tell you,
It's not easy. It's not easy listening.
It's not easy listening, but purely for the quality of like reporting and work that went into it, it's just 5 out of 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is The Man in the Window. Also a very creepy title, but it really fits. You can get it wherever you get your podcast, and I would absolutely recommend giving it a listen.
So for the second thing we want to review this week, and I know that we normally review true crime documentaries, podcasts and books, but this week we wanted to talk about The Stranger, which is an 8-part Netflix show based on the book by the same name by New York author Harlan Coben. This is a fiction, not
Not
non-fiction.
nonfiction.
Show. It's did either of you read the book or
No,
no?
I haven't read the book, and I haven't watched the show either, so I am completely new to this.
we are gonna not do any spoilers though, right?
Yeah, but yeah, but I will say that the show is pretty like heavy with twists. I don't know if you're like familiar with Harlan Coben's work, but it's quite twisty. So whilst we aren't going to discuss the plot in like great details, we might inadvertently let slip a few spoilers. So take this as like a tiny warning. So unlike Coben's book, which is set in New Jersey, the adaptation starts by painting a picturesque image of a middle-class family living in suburbs of northern England. Lawyer Adam Price. I wrote, Lawyer Adam Price is a lawyer. Wow.
Oh, what
Wow,
is he?
I'm so good at writing. Lawyer Adam Price has 2 boys with his wife Corinne. Whilst Corinne is away at a teacher conference, a mysterious woman approaches Adam and drops a life-destroying secret on him that I was going to put a spoiler in there, but I'll take it out. So he confronts his wife about it and she disappears the next day. The show then follows Adam's desperate hunt for Corinne while his older son questions his involvement in the discovery of a decapitated llama, an unconscious classmate found naked in the woods, and another classmate's perpetual suffering from a mystery illness. So while the police are trying to see if there's a link between the llama and the unconscious kid, they're fighting their own battles after a... spoilers. So the stranger, the woman herself, then appears at a number of different times in a number of different characters and reveals secrets to families, sometimes seemingly for no reason, and then sometimes to extort money out of people. So, like most of Harlan Coben's novels, there are threads sort of left, right, and centre that seemingly kind of flutter around in the wind, and you're left dangling on some of them, and then only most of them are tied together at the end. And you can make some really good educated guesses about what is what and who is who. But I found it like quite a good watch. It was really kind of gripping. And the cast is brilliant as well. There's like Jennifer Saunders and Anthony Head and Lily Lovelace and Paul Kay. And according to IMDb, because I'm a nerd and I looked it up, Harlan Coben himself actually appears in it.
He does.
Oh,
He's
shit.
he's in episode
does.
2 and he's playing a detective sitting on one of the computers in like the little police office. So yeah, it was really cool. And I thought it was really good. Anna, did you watch it?
Yes, I watched all of it. I even watched it because my husband and I have watched his other stuff that's been made into TV, and we really like him. So when I saw the new one is out, I mean, okay, it's not gonna. I think acting, there's good cast, but I mean, it's not gritty. It's not a gritty show. It's but it's very much. Harlan Coben is a brilliant mystery sort of writer. He has that way of all his stuff has a lot of twists, and you have different storylines kind of going at the same time, and you kind of don't find out until the end how they all kind of weave together or get conclusions on each thing, and he just has such a way of keeping you sort of guessing. And I thought it was great. I loved the ending. I thought the ending was actually sort of surprised me more than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with things like that where they leave everything at the end to like try and tie it together, sometimes I feel really let down with the like big reveal.
Yeah.
But this one was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I think it's worth a watch. It's really, like I said, it is really gripping. I loved it. And carrying over to like Harlan Coben, if you guys don't know who he is, you could pretty much pick up any of his books. He has he's written 32 novels to date. He does have I think, sorry, I should have written that down. I think he's about 9 of them that are one character that revolves around one character. But and some of the characters appear in that. But then he has quite a lot of standalone novels. I have to say, I don't know if you guys have ever watched this. I'm going to guess no, but I'm challenging our listeners as well. One of the best films I've ever seen is called Tell No One, and it's a French film, and I really like French films. But Will, actually, when we first started dating, he's like, you got to watch this. It's brilliant. And it's like true Harlan Coben style. It's still one of my favorite films. Just the storyline was just excellent. So if anybody out there has seen it as well, I know it's kind of obscure, or look it up and try and find it because it's so good. He produced several other series. The Five, did you guys watch The Five?
No.
No,
That
I
was
don't think
made
so.
with Sky, in production with Sky, and that aired, I think, on like Sky Atlantic or something like that. That was really, really good, and that I think went on to Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix anymore, but it was, it was on a couple of years ago, and that was excellent. I don't think that one was a book. I think that one was literally just produced and written for TV. Could be wrong, but I checked through it, and I'm sure it's not a book. And then there was Safe, which, did you guys watch Safe? It was on Netflix?
Yes. Yeah, I watched that. What was
that
the
was
main...
good.
who's the main actor in that?
He's Dexter, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
shit, what's his
Dexter.
name?
Michael
Yeah. Hall.
Hall.
Is that
Yeah.
Hall? Is it Hall?
Yeah,
Michael
you're right.
C. Hall.
C. Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Michael C. Hall.
C. Hall.
He had the worst British accent
Oh, it's terrible.
in that.
Appalling.
That's what killed it for me. I think I watched the first 2 episodes and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't get past his stupid ass
Terrible.
voice.
Yeah.
You're like,
it was
turn it
bad.
off. Yeah, no, it was awful. Absolutely awful.
I did watch all of Safe, but The Stranger was better than Safe. I still enjoyed Safe. Like, it was a watch, whatever. But that was really, I think The Stranger is really good. But yeah, especially, so he's always like a good like go-to mystery book because you just know that it's going to be like good twists.
It's
and
one of the
turns.
ones that you can like pick up at the airport and then like read on a flight.
Yes.
Exactly, because
Like-
it's gripping.
Unassuming. A bit like Dean Koontz, that kind of...
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
that kind of genre.
Exactly.
What would you guys rate it out of 5?
I think like a 3.5.
Yeah.
4-ish. 4
yeah,
on a
I'd say,
good
like-
day.
Can we like have a 3.7 maybe? 3.7?
You always go for like a weird point whatever, and you can do what you want, Anna.
You guys are always so kind with your ratings, though.
I know.
It's like, oh,
Like a 4-ish
know.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it is like a good, it's just at night when you're, glass of wine, have a watch.
It's a nice,
I
like, palate cleanser from...
yes,
life.
it's not too gritty, not too horrible, but yeah.
Definitely.
Weird Crime Time.
This is probably the most disgusting weird crime time.
I mean, after the shitter,
yeah, worse than the shitter?
I know.
Oh, I think it's not as bad as the shitter, maybe worse than the man who farted on the train.
Well, we're
Okay.
really bringing out the bodily functions.
Oh, there aren't
last
body
episodes.
fluids in this one. Kind of,
Okay.
maybe.
Oh God,
potentially.
oh.
So this week I'm taking you, for weird crime time, I'm taking you to Spain.
Ooh,
I don't think we've ever been to Spain before, have we?
no.
No.
See, trying new things. So, Maria del Carmen Marino, 61 years old, asked her neighbour to store a box in her neighbour's house. The box contained sex toys, and Maria didn't want them in her house. As she was concerned, investigators would find them when they came to search her house in connection with Maria's missing partner's disappearance, who was called Jesus. He was 67 at the time. There are kind of reports that she either tried to give the box to the neighbour or ask the neighbour to store the box, but one way or the other there was a box. It moved from Maria's house and it moved into her neighbour's house. That was in or around sort of October 2019, and Jesus had been missing since February 2019. So the neighbour took this box and stored it away, and I don't know how long she stored it for, but after, quote, some time, close quotes, according to metro.com, the box started to smell.
Oh, no.
So the neighbour decides, oh, I'll open the box, which I don't think I would be willing to do, knowing that it was full of your 61-year-old neighbour's sex toys.
She's 61.
And also, it's smelling weird.
Yeah.
I missed the whole she's 61 thing.
Yeah, she was 61, Jesus was 67.
Okay.
So she opens up the box and she finds something truly awful. Not a 61-year-old sex toys, she finds the decapitated head of Jesus. So I'm so sorry. So some reports say that it had been boiled and wrapped in foil.
Oh, God.
I'm so sorry. Some say it was just badly decomposed. Either way, having a whole human head in a box in your house, no thank you. No, thank
How
you very much.
ballsy would you have to be to give that to your neighbor?
I know.
How stupid.
I know. What? How is that ever going to go right?
It's never going to end well. I think maybe that it was the way it had been. Oh, I was about to say prepared. That's really terrible. The way it had been attempted to be preserved and wrapped in foil. She thought maybe it wouldn't start to smell.
So were there actual sex toys in there, or she just said they were sex toys so she wouldn't open it?
There's nothing in the article that said that there weren't sex toys. So I'm assuming it was a box of sex toys with a head in it.
Okay.
And I don't know whether they were packaged or whether they were just rattling around.
Yeah, imagine if it just turned on. If you just where's that buzzing coming from?
Oh my God.
They're like, oh shit. And they open the box. It's like,
oh fuck.
God.
That's so disgusting.
know,
so
sorry.
Maria is facing a murder charge at her home in northern Spain. Jesus was reported as missing by his concerned family, but Maria told police, who inquired at the time, the missing persons report was made that Jesus had abandoned her and had taken 12,000 euros with him. So there was no one was really that concerned that he was dead. They thought that he'd just taken the money and gone, and he was later days. But no.
So do we know where the rest of Jesus is?
We do not yet. I'm going to keep a very close eye on it. I've set up a Google alert. I'm that interested in this because I think that is truly the worst place for your own head to be found.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were the neighbor and you thought, okay, I'm preparing myself to open this box. It's going to be a bit traumatic because it's my elderly neighbor's sex toys.
Mm-hmm.
You're composing yourself. You're getting ready. You know what you're going to look at is not good. But then to open it and have a head in there, oh my God.
I think because it was wrapped up as well.
Oh, so she would have to.
She would have to have she would have to have
Peel
unpeeled that foil, and I think that is probably the worst part.
I think I would have just preferred the sex toys. Just give me a box of dildos any day over the head.
Yes.
Well, you get both with Maria. You get both.
It's a 2-for-1.
Yeah. Oh, God. Well, I think that's all we have for today. Please check out our website at murderfriends.com. You can email us, murderfriendspod@gmail.com. Let us know your weird crime times, your suggestions of things to review, interesting crimes, which we've been getting and we appreciate. They're going on our master list. Follow us on Instagram, murderfriendspod, or Twitter, murderfriendspd. And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.